Keith Wilson joins us now. Mr. Wilson, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Now, this inquiry, it is looking into the invocation of the Emergencies Act, whether or not it was justified or an overreach on behalf of the government. And you've already stated, insinuated that it was an overreach. Why have you come to that conclusion?
Well, we're under law. We know that this is the successor to the War Measures Act. The legislation's only supposed to be invoked by cabinet when we're facing an extreme existential threat to the country, to the nation, to our, the enemy is within the border type of a situation. And what we know was happening when the Emergencies Act was invoked, when the cabinet decided to invoke it on the Sunday evening of the 13th of February, that weekend, the border blockades at Coutts and at Windsor had cleared. Those borders were all open. The only protest left in Canada at that time was the protest in downtown Ottawa. And over that weekend, myself as one of the lead counsel for the Freedom protesters had negotiated with them a deal with the Ottawa City Mayor to de-escalate the situation in Ottawa.
So a deal, as you said, between the organizers and the Ottawa Mayor. But really, what would that have done? How would that have ended the protest? Because to my understanding of it, it was just about moving vehicles rather than vacating the parliamentary precinct.
Well, the main point of aggravation was the number of large trucks and protest vehicles in the downtown core. And in the downtown area, of course, there's hotels and there's there's business towers, but there's also condo towers and there's apartments. And so the concern that some of the trucker leaders had was sort of overstaying the welcome, de-escalating tensions. And there you can see on the screen the trucks moving. So the arrangement that the mayor's vision was de-escalate the pressure on the downtown core, consolidate the trucks to the extent there was still space on Wellington, and then move the balance out of town to these remote locations that had been set at Armpar and another place. And then the truckers could shuttle in on buses, shuttle buses that were already in place, and attend protests during the day, but move the protest vehicles out of the downtown core to allow normalcy to come. And that was the vision that the mayor had. The trucker leadership agreed to it, and we were well on our way to implementing it on the Monday.
Well, the mayor of Ottawa is Jim Watson currently. He says he will not comment on the deal because he will be appearing before this inquiry. But there is a spokesperson for the public safety minister, and according to the spokesperson, cabinet did monitor actions after that deal was struck, and apparently they saw the deal being denounced by key organizers, which in part is why they moved forward with the Emergencies Act. How do you respond to that?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what they have to say when they're under oath and cross-examined, because here's the facts. That there was strong buy-in from the truckers to make this move to de-escalate. The facts speak for themselves, which are on the Monday morning. After Sunday night, there was a logistics meeting at City Hall with one of the superintendents of police, the city manager, the head of emergency services, some of my legal team, and the trucker leadership. And they put a plan together that they implemented Monday morning. It resulted in 102 vehicles leaving the downtown, 42 of which were large trucks. 23 went up onto Wellington, as you can see on the screen, with police escort. And then the balance left town. We cleared 2 city blocks. We were on track to, the mayor agreed, and it's right in the letter that's publicly available and it was filed in evidence, that the mayor recognized that this was a large logistical exercise and it could take 3 days to clear the downtown, but for Wellington. And that's what we were on track to do. We made great progress on the first day, cleared 2 blocks, and we were on track. And then we had problems on the Tuesday with miscommunication. There were so many different police agencies from Windsor and Kingston and different police forces. The communications between the police were really bad. And as we kept trying to move, we got blocked. And then on the Wednesday, I got a phone call from the city manager because we got blocked again as we were trying to do further moves. And he said that the new interim chief, as well as the federal government, didn't want the deal to go ahead. And it was stopped at that time. So they ended up bringing in police on the Friday and beating up and arresting Canadian protesters. Clearing downtown by Sunday. If we hadn't had those interventions, we were on track to have the downtown opened up by the Wednesday.
So the fact that there were one or two organizers on social media denouncing the deal is inconsequential?
Yeah, well, I mean, this was an organic event. There was, when I was in the logistics center, the operations center, we'd get a report that 20 trucks were arriving, from Kitchener, and then 30 trucks were arriving from Nova Scotia, and there was a convoy. Like, it was like, where, who, what? This was not like an orchestrated event. It was purely spontaneous. And so the idea that there was some central command that could make everybody comply was just not how it worked in the real world. And it was all moral suasion. The buy-in was terrific. It was proven by the fact that the first two blocks that we attempted to clear were completely cleared out of all protest vehicles. Now, it is true that the vehicles were consolidating onto Wellington, but that's where the grievance was. The grievance was with the federal government and the COVID mandates. And, interestingly, I just went for a walk. Wellington's closed right now. It's been closed ever since by the government. So with the barricades that they have up. So the reason that I and others believe this was an overreach, there wasn't a national security incident to begin with. The basic trigger to meet the law wasn't there. And what's troubling for me and others is that had there not been these interventions, we knew that the borders were open on the weekend. Well, all that was left was Ottawa. We had a deal working with the mayor and his vision to restore his downtown to the residents and businesses, and we were well on track to implementing that until it got stopped.
Well, respectfully, Mr. Wilson, there may be residents out there, many of Ottawa Centretown, businesses as well, people that lost money, lost their shifts, felt trapped in their home, that might argue that there was a security threat, a security to their person, not having the freedoms that they should be having because of this protest. What do you say to those individuals who may be more sympathetic to the use of the Emergencies Act?
Well, the crime data is empirical. Crime dropped, so that's going to come out. There's not even anybody suggesting that anymore. That narrative's gone.
But does that mean to say that individual residents were not harassed or felt trapped in their home?
Well, I'm not. I don't think they were harassed. That's not the prevailing thing, the evidence that I've seen and I observed my firsthand. But let's talk about something that's clear, which is they were inconvenienced. It wasn't a pleasant experience for some of the residents, for sure. In the same way that it wasn't a pleasant experience for Canadians to be facing mandates.
But these individual residents did not enact rules and regulations. They were just living their lives.
Fair enough, sir, but they chose to live in the capital city. And if you're going to suggest that the protesters should have gone to some remote rural community and protested there, when you live in the capital city and you enjoy the benefits of the incredible architecture and capital infrastructure that's here, we all know that protesters come here. This is not novel. You know well that the capital city of a country, of a nation, is where people go to protest when they feel their governments have crossed lines. That's what happened on a grand scale.
But I think though, the difference being that when there have been protests in the past, it might be a march to the Hill, it might be a protest on the Hill, certainly not an occupation that lasts day after day and into weeks. So very different, and certainly not protests that in the past have involved big rigs that are honking horns 24/7 and emitting carbon into the air that people are choking on. What do you say to that?
Never before in our history, sir, has a government, the federal government, invoked mandates that prevented 6 million unvaccinated Canadians from traveling by plane and train in their country, the second largest country in the world by landmass. Never before did thousands of people who worked at airports, baggage handlers, clerks, security people lose their jobs because they exercised their choice over bodily autonomy. I can keep going. military, the number of people that have left our military that we invested in all their training because they were concerned about the uncertainty around the rushed approval of the vaccine. This was an incredibly, I know you're not going to suggest to me that the pandemic was a minor event, nor that the government's response was unprecedented. Unprecedented action by government will bring unprecedented response, I would suggest, by its citizens when they think the government's gone too far. And that's what happened in January and February in Ottawa.
Yeah, I think so, Mr. Wilson. I think, Mr. Wilson, and respectfully, I think the disconnect here, though, is that the people that ended up paying the price for that, in many ways during the course of this protest, were not actually the people enacting the laws, creating the regulations, but people who are just trying to live their lives, who are all of a sudden trapped in their home, and many of them not feeling safe to walk their own streets.
Well, Michael, I think that's why those who were trying to keep the protest peaceful urged the truckers that the time had come for them to move out of the downtown. And this is what civil disobedience is and lawful protests involves. It involves sometimes making government and people feel uncomfortable in response to the discomfort that the citizens felt by the government policy. So this is part of our democratic process, is that when people and citizens feel that a government's gone too far, is they engage in protest. And that's what happened. Was it of a grand scale? Yes. But it was spontaneous, and I think it was reflection of the depth of sentiment within Canadians that something had gone terribly wrong in our country, and the impact on their children with the school closures. Now, admittedly, the federal government didn't do that. But for those things that the federal government controlled, they felt they needed to come here and voice their concerns and ask for the rule of law and the charter to be respected.
So at the end of the day then, Mr. Wilson, what do you hope this inquiry flushes out?
Well, I hope the accurate information comes out, that we hear all perspectives. Really, the question for the inquiry is whether or not the freezing of bank accounts and the impact that had on people and isolating them, and how that could be done so arbitrarily, and preventing them from paying mortgages and getting gas and getting groceries and medicines for their kids. The level of violence that we saw from the police during the clearing out of protesters on the Friday, and to a lesser extent Saturday, was that really justified? Why didn't the Prime Minister meet with the protesters and try and be proactive like Mayor Watson was in de-escalating the situation? I think those are questions that hopefully will get answered.
Keith Wilson, really appreciate the time today. Thank you for that.
Thank you, sir.